Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Do you have any comments, questions, modifications?
No, Mr. Skipper, I will just say that we'll just have within the 25-26 budget preview, we'll have an ongoing budget discussion as well that includes cash flow, includes preparations that we're making and will be making.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
We'll move to approve the agenda.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, with that, we'll move on to delegations. Mr. Peterson.
I have no delegations this evening.
Then we'll move on to the proposed consent agenda. Any comments or questions here?
Motion to approve post consent agenda. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, move on to public comments. Do we have any public comments today? Do we have any electronic? That your records in danger right now.
Oh, no.
Mr. Skipper, if you don't mind,
Yes.
while we are having discussion, I wanted to make a special note because we have several people in our new hires area who, while they are new hires, letter of the law, most all of them are current employees or past employees who are moving into different roles. And we got a very good group of new staff, new teachers, returning teachers. And just wanted to put that out, including Angelica Smith at ECAP is returning to us. So just wanted to make that note.
Great, thank you. All right, with that, seeing no unfinished business, we'll move on to new business, 2025-26 budget preview.
Thank you, Mr. Skipper. The purpose of this agenda item, quite frankly, is primarily discussion. When John Mona and I, when we have met and discussed what goes into us preparing the budget for the 25-26 school year, really the outcome that I asked John to make sure that we give the board tonight in hard numbers are projected incoming revenue based on our enrollment. Then at that point, we have some historical looks at the enrollment, and then are prepared to answer any questions that the board has as far as other considerations or considerations that the board would like us to take into account as we're prepping the budget for both public hearing and for adoption later in July. So with that, I will turn this over to Mr. Hassel and he'll take us through some items.
Well, first off, I must apologize. I thought you just wanted the enrollment. I didn't know you wanted the enrollment and the revenue. My apologies.
That is okay. We've got a calculator.
So the one thing I did want to point out is for the 24-25 school year, the expectation was roughly 1,286 students, but it looks like our average is actually 1,258 is what we're going to end up with the year. But that is more or less just a segue into our projected enrollment for the 25-26 school year, in which we're looking at roughly 1,230. A lot different than what was projected in the past. But that's honestly just kind of where we are sitting at the moment. I'll go back to the revenue in a minute, but as far as our schedule, tomorrow Mona and I are going to the ESD 123 and we're going to meet up with Drew, which should finalize everything for the budget so that I can start putting the presentations together. We've got down July 17th for the board budget workshop. And then on the 28th of July, I'll actually be doing the budget presentation.
Yeah, just a note, I'm gonna be out of town on the 17th, but I can join remotely.
Okay.
Okay.
And before we move on to the next agenda item, we'll have a discussion about that day is not set in stone, but also time of day and things like that. Well, when we look at one of the biggest concerns that I have currently, and I'm really doing my darndest to focus on the here and now and what we know versus the what I hope happens, what I want to see happen versus what could happen. Probably my personal biggest concern right now for 25-26 is our current kindergarten enrollment. We are still on 52 kids, which would be an unfathomable drop, quite frankly. And I fully expect to see that number increase, and we're projecting 75 for 25-26 school year. But that is a number that we have seen decline not only here in Benton City, but around the region, quite frankly, across the state. Our enrollment in kindergarten the last 2 years has seen a pretty significant drop off. So 24, 25, 78 incoming kindergartners, projecting 75 for 25-26, and that's taking into account comparison of numbers between ECAP students, our own transitional kindergarten students, the ECAP program carousel. And that's where we came up with 75. We also know that there are a group of kindergarten students who simply a week before school starts, that's when they come in and get signed up. So I did learn though that back in the 2019-20 school year, we fully anticipated that exact scenario happening. Where the prior year we had 114 kids in the 18-19 school year. We had 84 kids on August 1st, and we fully anticipated being well over 100 by October 1st. And on October 1st, we were at exactly 84 kids. So that was a one-time anomaly, and I believe moving forward, though, we're now starting to see a trend, which is a decrease in enrollment at our kinder level. Now, those numbers from 1920 that were at 84, as you move forward, those kids came back to us. Meaning that those kids will be in 6th grade, and while it's only jumped up to 86 for 6th grade, it went as high as 96 in 4th grade. So we've seen some in and out from that particular cohort. What I'm hoping is that will prove to be the case with last year's kindergarten cohort and this year's, as years go on that we see them returning. However, that's certainly not something we want to bank on. So we're projecting at 1,230, and that is a very conservative number. But I also feel like we certainly can't afford to anticipate high and have it come in under. But our 10-year average enrollment has been a saving grace for many years. And as I have said to the board multiple times, during COVID, we did not see this steep drop off that a number of other local districts did. In fact, we were one of the few to increase after COVID. In the 21-22 school year, we actually jumped up by 56 kids. 51 as I put my glasses on now. But those numbers are now starting to trail off as a district. And so I think we're seeing just a belated impact of that. But I have talked with several other superintendents here in the past week. They are all seeing kindergarten numbers extremely low. The one saving grace, if I can say, is that at least right now, we have 13 kids enrolled in transitional kindergarten. As you know, the state funding of transitional kindergarten has been, for lack of a better word, under attack, quite frankly. And so whereas that is a program that had 18 as its capacity, they dropped that number for us specifically to 13 because that's about the number that we had at the time that they did counts last year. And so what they did was they froze everybody's numbers across the state and then rolled them in as the projection. Now, what I've done is reached out to OSPI to see, at a time when we started transitional kindergarten, we had 2 full classes of 18, gave us 36 kids. Is there a way for us at least to get back to 1 full section of 18, if not even more, as potential? But this is going to preclude some potential staffing changes because we had fully planned on having 5 sections of kindergarten next year and probably no sections of transitional kindergarten. This may very well be a case where we drop down to 4 sections of kinder and enroll our current kindergarten teacher into the transitional program. We still have a few openings that we've got to shuffle about. And so we're going to do everything we can, but if the numbers don't necessitate hiring from the outside, we will not. We'll simply do whatever maneuvering we can internally to get those covered, and only when we know that the kids are there physically will we go out and bring someone else in.
So we're gonna build the budget right now, but projecting 75.
Projecting 75. That also does not take into account the 13 transitional kindergarten kids that we talked about. Those are not in the same, they're not funded the same, so we no longer count them as kindergarten students. Whereas when you look back 3 or 4 years ago, those kids were included as kindergartners, and that's how Basic Ed was able to fund them. And so now those are not considered kindergartners. They're funded in a separate formula that gives us the same amount of income and revenue, but does not count them on your P223. I think the real question is, as it pertains to revenue, we're well aware that we spend a good amount of time trying to keep the picture. We've been roughly kids you're projecting 600,000 people. That same for 60. So we're putting it all the way there. And we may need but I'm cautiously optimistic we're going to get early kindergarten numbers, and knock on wood that we'll get some approval from OSPI for some extension in TK. I think that it is a spot. And reopen. What are some questions that you would like us to address either through this evening? This meeting?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think just having scenarios prepared for,
What happened? That does that.
federal items that you've discussed, if, think further on that, but just be prepared for potential cuts.
I know that John has done some preliminary work addressing each of the federal items. We didn't want to put it out for public dissemination this evening simply because we're talking about building the 25-26 budget that is not incumbent on any of these cuts for that particular budget. However, when you take a look at some of those line items of federal cuts, it is enough to make me lose some sleep at night. Couple that with the possibility of a levy failure. It would change the outlook considerably and quite quickly as to how fundamentally we would be doing business moving forward. Question, Nick?
Yeah, I think that's real important because it allows the board and the voters to know exactly what the challenges are. And what we have to face is the hard decisions are made.
Right.
Because inevitably it's all out there. That's which one of here's what we're gonna have to face up to. We might have to do it, but at least knowing where you're at in any business before you go in without them is critical.
The one thing I do need to add is on July 28th, whenever we do the budget presentation, there's a pretty good chance, most likely, that we're going to be presenting for an extension as well.
An extension of the 24-25 budget.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
I'm assuming the presentation like that which might be the exact visual. There'll also be any impacts to the change of change that would bring about.
Yes, sir.
And of course, if I'll remind the board, this is I think the term I used earlier today was that's a safety valve. That's ensuring that we have the capacity to spend dollars if the need arises versus we're going to go spend this dollar amount.
Do we have any feel for the size of an extension at this point, or save that until?
John?
Probably say save that until
Yeah.
the conversation.
Fair enough.
Every day, sometimes every hour, my thoughts and confidence change.
Fair enough. Any other comments or questions on the budget preview?
I don't, I don't know, all of this,
So,
all of
yeah,
these red numbers make me really nervous, and I don't know
So when we're
how we're gonna fix that.
So, as the board is aware, one of the fundamental issues, quite frankly, that we face from the state is a non-consistent apportionment pattern. Delayed, inconsistent, all of these different things that add up to there are times when we are spending money knowing that the apportionment is coming
Right.
that we simply don't have yet. Then, of course, you turn around and we get a significant amount of our apportionment during our June, July, and August, which is great. But then you couple that with the fact, and Mona, I'll ask for some input here in a moment, but you also then couple that with the requirements of retirements, sick leave cash out, vacation buyback or cash out, all of the things that go into a person's retirement or separation from the district, those all come due at the last month, which is the last month of the regular pay period, and moving into then one of the largest pay periods, which is September 1st, because that's when we have professional development that's occurring in August. So we have this bow wave of expenditures before and after that larger portion. However,
I was gonna say, just to kind of give you an idea of that apportionment, the estimated cash receipts of the revenue that's coming in from that. In May, you're looking at 1.37. In June, you're looking at 1.29, just when all those expenses are hitting. And then in July, you get 2.5, 2.44 in August. And so you can see how it kind of ebbs and flows right during this time of year. Our apportionment coming in is just low, so with all the expenses and everything else that's going on, it really stings the cash flow.
now what are we doing to try and alleviate that, like right now? For lack of a better term, as well as moving forward. So any of our significant purchases, whether that be while we're cutting new curriculum expenses, we still have curriculum consumables and things like that we have to bring in every year.
Right.
So when we are meeting with our representatives and talking to them, we're trying to figure out payment schedules that more align to our revenue stream. Most companies, as anyone who runs their own business does, they'd love to see that dollar figure up front, and they want to see a PO with the total amount whenever possible. And we've been probably more successful than not. We're getting companies to realize that this is not simply an us issue, that this is a statewide issue. They're having these same conversations with other school districts as well, so that we can time some of these out over multiple months or during parts of the year when we have more significant revenue. And so those are real conversations that are taking place. And quite frankly, I had one rep during a Zoom meeting that she was very frank and said, I've never been asked that before. Went to their business people who confirmed that they have been asked multiple times recently, and they were able to accommodate us. So as opposed to writing a large PO with a reimbursement in September, we're going to have two payments, one in October, one then in December, which are, quite frankly, just better times for our revenue flow. And that's one example of multiple options and opportunities to do that kind of stretching over time. We've even moved to our English language arts at the secondary level, which is a subscription service, not you pay for it all right now and you're good for 6 years, like we did with the elementary. And I think you're going to see more of that type of scenario moving forward, especially as more and more curriculum move to online or cloud-based. You're going to see those types of options.
That makes sense with our expense planning. Are we having conversations with our vendors about our current payables and whether we can stretch the due dates on any of those and still remain in their good graces? Just
Stretching. I'm everything. If it comes down to, I've got it planned out. If I can hold them, I hold them. Just trying to keep with that number on the spreadsheet. Sometimes it's tough to do, but it's like, I was happy. Oh, okay, we're done with insurance, but then, oh, wait, now we gotta pay. Because we do, even insurance, we got to monthly. Because it's so large.
Right.
I remember years ago, we could pay out front. Be done. In fact, we did it as a prepay to roll out the year. Now we're on a payment plan. Cause it's just that substantial of an increase. So wherever we can, I've got all the directors doing the same thing. And the principals, they don't like it, but I mean, because it's a little more tedious and they gotta plan more and plan accordingly, so. I tell them, no, that's not gonna happen, but we could probably do it here, maybe April, maybe, so there were a lot of projects that we had to like. Just schedule out.
I think one of the things that, and we've had this discussion in different contexts before. But we are very cognizant now that it's wonderful to receive a grant for, let's say, $25,000. But when we're then required to pay that dollar amount out and ask for reimbursement, that puts a big strain on the system. And there will be times when we're telling our principals and directors, appreciate the fact that this is a grant scenario and that you want to apply for this grant, but if it requires us to front load all of that funding, then we need to reconsider even whether it's worth applying for. Even when you're looking at either federal or state carryover dollars, if they then require us to front load that before we actually see the receipt of those dollars, that has to be taken into consideration. There's a big difference in my worldview between sending money back to the state that never really made it to us, but is on a piece of paper, versus money they sent us and we haven't done anything with it.
Right.
But those are real conversations that, quite frankly, we haven't had to have. And now we're having at least weekly, if not bi-weekly, a couple times a week to make sure that those things are occurring. We have to be very cognizant of that.
So given the current cash flow situation, are we anticipating any pushback from the county as far as loading anything?
That discussion needs to be had.
Okay.
And I think in the past discussions we've had with them, we told them we want to be upfront and transparent about that. So.
In fact, it was a couple of years ago when we had the discussion at the county treasurer's office, ironically, as Dan and I were talking before the meeting in Prosser. They were completely unaware of the revenue issues that we discussed earlier. The county treasurer had no idea that school districts' apportionment and revenue came in such varying capacities. That was a good starting point a few years ago, and we're going to keep carrying on with the idea that at least right now we aren't looking at the amount of red, the high amount of red that we saw for the amount that they covered for us 3 years ago. A little bit longer time period though, potentially.
Okay.
But of course, following a meeting or anything like that with county treasurer, the board will be first to know the results of that meeting and the potential impacts.
All right.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions on budget preview? All right, with that, we'll move on to item 8B, property request, Mr. Peterson.
This is a new one. And so I want to make sure that in the board packet, you saw a highly detailed map with a very poorly drawn red circle around it. The red circle is mine. So what you see is kind of an L shape. And the part that's circled is the and the leg of the L. And I was approached a couple of weeks ago by our community homeowner there at 914 West 13th. And the question came up about that land that is circled is she assumed that it was ours and wanted to know about any easements and wanted to know for the purpose of bringing in a trailer for her elderly father to live in. And when she talked with the city of Benton City, they then called me and I had a meeting with George on Friday. And that entire L shape, including the part that's circled, is nobody owns it. It's sitting out there waiting for somebody to claim it, want it, need it.
Sovereign country all by itself.
It could be a sovereign country all by itself.
Better hurry.
Yeah. I had never heard of such a thing, but George took me through the paperwork. That property, and if you extend Fay Avenue out, this is the property that if the road actually connected to 13th, you take a right after our baseball softball field. And you could go down about better part of 3 blocks and then take a slight jog when you hit our soccer field. That property was originally owned in the 1880s by an irrigation district. And in the early 20s, the irrigation district people just up and moved out of Benton City. Therefore, that land went over to ownership of the county. Then in the 50s, the county shows, and I wish I could make this stuff up, but the county shows a document saying that that property is now owned by blank. An underline with no name in it. What the city knows is it doesn't belong to them. It doesn't belong to the county. It doesn't belong to us. And the homeowner would really like it to be accessible to her.
So who's been paying the taxes on?
And therein lies the rub. Nobody.
Nobody.
So is it
Which
like
is why the city is perfectly amenable to adding that circled area into her lot. If the school doesn't have any issues with that. As we talked, as we looked at the map, I honestly, there is no use that the district could get out of that literally 20-foot wide little chunk of land next to our chain link fence. But the wider strip that's probably 70 feet wide
Behind that.
behind all 3 of those properties and on the backside of our our baseball softball fields, that one we have some interest in. Because obviously if the school or if the city extends Fay to West 13th, and George told me at this point in time, they absolutely plan to extend Fay through to 13th. When that happens, that area would become a prime location for district service vehicles and things to access the backside of our property without actually being out on 13th, out on a busy street. So realistically, twofold. The first being I'm fully prepared and perfectly okay with that little 20-foot strip on the north side of 914 West 13th of that going over into the lot as the homeowner would like. However, And there has been no discussion yet, but I have a feeling that once homeowners find out that they were able to do this with that little chunk, I want to be very proactive and say to George, the district not only wants that, we need it. Especially if and when Fay is extended, we'll need that as service access for our own property.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure that the board is aware, because one of the biggest things as we were discussing this is the last thing I wanted was for anyone to think the school district, because I would be willing to bet if you ask anybody, that's our property. I bet you people right now think that that is all of our property. And the last thing I wanted was anybody thinking we're just giving it away to homeowners for their own, because they asked nicely. It's currently not owned by anybody.
Everybody can pull this map up and see that that's the case. It's not included in our parcel number. It's not included in anybody's parcel number. When if you know how to read a county map, should be able to look at that and see that nobody owns it.
There's clearly now a situation, or at least there's gotta be an understanding that in agreeing to this, we're not assuming any past problems or taxes or anything. We're not giving away, doesn't look like to me we're giving away anything.
No,
We're just saying we don't object.
Right.
correct.
We never owned the property.
Correct. And that was the primary purpose of putting this on the board agenda, getting the map out there, is just so people could see, okay, the school district is not so flush with dollars, they can just give away their own property. That would be foolish, but it really does, after this conversation that I had with George, it really does beg the question, okay, I think we need to take care of the rest of the property in question and ensure that at least a public easement for the district is in place, if not simply extending our property line out to include that.
Because any future easements involving this property would be between the new property owner and the organization seeking the easement.
Correct. Correct. So there's no decision to be made because we're neither selling nor giving away anything. This really was just a case of I wanted the board to be aware of it. However, I think that we do need to have further discussions, and I'm going to be forwarding this map and this entire scenario along with copies of whatever documentation George can get me to our attorney, and just say, okay, we want to make sure that we're doing this the right way to ensure that our access to our own property isn't forfeited in the long run.
So at this point, your understanding is that 914 only wants the narrow long piece.
Correct.
The
They
chunk
want
right
nothing to the east of that towards our building.
It's interesting that the county hasn't been seeking some of them, there's some property tax for years and years and years.
Maybe they should have been taxing themselves.
Oh,
You know what?
They've never been that kind to me, my property, it's like, you don't want to pay up.
I really had a difficult time wrapping my head around the idea that an irrigation district in the 1880s would all up and just leave and here you go county. But one of the things that George told me was that this is not very uncommon in places where he used to work, cities like Montezano, cities like anything that had a significant lumber industry around the turn of the 19th to 20th century. When those logging companies went out of business, he said that they left little pieces of land like this scattered all over these small towns, and that the county didn't want them, city didn't want them, and they're just sitting there. He said the fact that they ran into this one was a little surprising, but he said it wasn't a shock considering what he'd seen in other systems. So anyway, like I said, I'm going to be going back to George once we settle up anything with this 20-foot wide strip. Also going to be making sure that our attorneys are aware that we're not going to be held for any previous taxes or previous anything along those lines.
That's what I was thinking, as long as the attorneys document that we're not responsible for this, so that in 5 years, somebody doesn't say, oh, hey, golly, we were looking at this and, let's talk about it again. No, here's the deal.
Well, and quite frankly, I'm gonna have a conversation with the homeowner again and make sure that, at this point in time, there is nothing there. There is not a trailer or anything else with windows. And by putting a trailer there in close proximity to our soccer and play fields, that they're not gonna come back and hammer on us when a baseball, softball, soccer ball goes through a window that wasn't there for the past 50 years. So we'll have that conversation.
All right. That was a fun one.
Just another reason why I love my job.
All right, with that, we'll move on to board comments. Any comments?
Nope, either.
That will move to superintendent's report.
You got the best part of the superintendent's report on the agenda, but the one thing I will tell you is that my 1 year as the president of the Superintendent Advisory Council at the ESD has come to an end, which is both well, no, it's not both anything. It's a blessing because I'm very glad to have that burden taken off. I was elected to the Superintendent Association State Board. But that won't impact the district. That's not considered professional development or anything like that on my end. That's something that I'm taking on my own time on 2 weekends a year to be able to be a part of the superintendent's board. But moving forward, if that interferes in any way with anything that's going on with the district obviously will take priority on that. So, with that, that's the other major piece of information I've got for you. Until we get the budget done, that's pretty much, we're working on the budget 24/7. So that's where my focus is, along with Mona and John.
All right. Okay, with that, we'll move into executive session pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, section 1G, performance of a public employee for 30 minutes with no business to follow, so we will be adjourned. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.